Camille, a 25-year-old woman, had just finished her long shift at the restaurant where she had been working for months. She staggered out of the building, almost stumbling, her feet sore after a day spent running between tables, juggling orders, and enduring her boss's toxic mood. Since 5 a.m., she hadn't had a second to herself, barely any time to sit down. The sky was growing darker as she quickened her pace to catch her evening bus, desperately hoping to find a seat in the often overcrowded vehicle at this hour. When she boarded the bus, she felt an almost unexpected relief, a vacant seat, right by the window. Eagerly, she sat down, sinking into the chair with a tired sigh. Her tense muscles finally relaxed, but her mind remained restless, constantly returning to her boss's biting remarks, to the suffocating feeling of never doing enough, of exhausting herself in a life that seemed without escape. She looked around. Each of the passengers was absorbed in their own world. Some were glued to their phones, others were listening to music or simply staring into space, lost in distant thoughts. No one was talking. Camille occasionally enjoyed this moment of floating, this relative calm where she was nothing more than an anonymous figure among many. She leaned her head back, closed her eyes for a moment, and let her thoughts wander. The bus suddenly slowed at the next stop, pulling Camille out of her reverie. She opened her eyes and absently watched the people boarding. Among them, an elderly woman got on with difficulty. She was wearing a long, worn-out coat, and her hands trembled slightly as she held onto the bar to keep her balance. Each step she took seemed to weigh a ton. Camille felt a wave of empathy wash over her as she watched the old woman searching for a seat, her eyes scanning the crowded space without success. All the seats were taken, and no one seemed willing to give up theirs. Slowly, the elderly woman leaned against the window, trying to stay upright despite the clear discomfort. She glanced around, as if desperately searching for a bit of kindness, but the other passengers continued to ignore her, absorbed in their own worlds. Camille watched her for a moment, an inner struggle taking place within her. She was exhausted, her body begging her to stay seated. But the sight of the elderly woman standing, fragile and uncomfortable, stirred something inside her. She remembered her mother's words, which had always encouraged her to reach out to others, even when it seemed difficult. Taking a deep breath, Camille sat up straight, gathered her courage, and with a tired smile, stood up. "Madam, you can take my seat," she said gently. The elderly woman turned toward her, surprised, and then a grateful smile appeared on her face. "Thank you, my dear. That's very kind of you," she murmured in a trembling voice as she took Camille's seat with relief. Camille stood, holding on to a bar to keep her balance, as the bus resumed its journey. She felt even more tired, but a slight sense of satisfaction washed over her. Having done something simple yet sincere calmed her. She glanced at the old woman, now sitting in her seat, who seemed more comfortable, her hands resting on her frail knees. The bus continued to roll through the night, the city lights flashing quickly through the windows. Stops came and went, passengers boarded and disembarked, but Camille couldn't stop thinking about the old woman. There was something special about her, a sort of mysterious presence that Camille couldn't quite explain. A few minutes later, the elderly woman suddenly turned to Camille, as though she had just remembered something important. She rummaged through her worn leather bag and pulled out a small piece of paper, which she handed to Camille without a word. Surprised, Camille hesitantly took the paper. "What is this?" she asked, but the elderly woman didn't answer. She simply smiled at her before getting up slowly and making her way to the door as her stop approached. Camille looked at the paper in her hand. It only contained a simple address, written in shaky handwriting. She furrowed her brows, not understanding the reason behind this gesture. Why had this woman given her an address? Was it a mistake? Should she go there? 1,000 questions swirled in her mind, but before she could react, the bus stopped, and the old woman slowly got off, disappearing into the darkness. Camille's journey continued, but her mind was now focused on the mysterious address. She tried to memorize it before folding the paper and slipping it into her pocket. With every turn of the bus, she wondered what she should do. Part of her simply wanted to forget this strange encounter, go home, and rest. The other part was intrigued, almost drawn to the idea of discovering what lay behind that address. When she arrived at her stop, Camille got off the bus, her thoughts still tangled. Once home, she discarded her work clothes, took a quick shower, and lay down on her bed, hoping to sleep. But despite her extreme fatigue, she couldn't close her eyes. The image of the old woman and the mysterious piece of paper kept coming back. Tossing and turning in bed, she eventually got up and grabbed the paper from her coat pocket. She read it again in the soft light of her bedside lamp. It really did look like an address, but she didn't recognize the surroundings. What if it's a trap, she thought, biting her lip. Or a prank? But a small voice inside her kept urging her to find out more. The uncertainty gnawed at her, and that night, she couldn't find sleep, torn between caution and curiosity. The next morning, the dark circles under her eyes were the evidence of a sleepless night. Unable to think of anything else, she made a decision. She would go see that address, if only to calm her mind and finally put an end to the mystery. After all, she had nothing to lose, except a few hours of her day. Dressed simply, Camille left her house, her heart pounding at the thought of what she was about to do. The bus took her through streets she had never traveled, but the anxiety and excitement mixed within her. As she approached the address, Camille observed her surroundings carefully. The neighborhood was a world of its own, with large houses and beautifully maintained gardens. She felt like an intruder in this world of luxury. Arriving at the address, she found herself standing in front of a grand estate, surrounded by tall hedges. The silence was almost oppressive, and she paused for a moment to breathe, trying to gather her courage. If this was a trap, she was determined not to be intimidated. After all, she had already taken the risk of coming here, driven by an insatiable curiosity. Camille stepped toward the large door, her sweaty hands gripping the piece of paper. She knocked, the sound echoing in the surrounding calm. A shiver ran down her spine. Was this really a good idea? She waited, her heart racing, before the door slowly opened. An older woman, elegantly dressed, appeared in the doorway. Her graying hair was styled in a perfect bun, and her sparkling eyes studied Camille with curiosity. "Hello, miss. How can I help you?" she asked in a soft yet authoritative voice. Camille hesitated for a moment, but the worry quickly shifted to determination. "I'm here because of this address. An elderly woman on the bus gave it to me. I don't know why, but I felt the need to come." The woman furrowed her brows and motioned for Camille to enter. "Come in, please. You're not the first to come here because of her." Intrigued, Camille followed the woman inside, the sumptuous decor immersing her in a world she had never known. Antique paintings adorned the walls, and the scent of fresh coffee lingered in the air. This elderly woman, her name is Marguerite. She has a gift for reading people's hearts, the woman explained as she walked toward the kitchen. She knows when someone needs help, even without a word. Camille was fascinated. What does she want from me? Why did she give me this address? The woman turned with a mysterious smile. "Come, you'll understand soon." She gestured for Camille to follow her into the grand living room, a lavish space lit by the soft morning light filtering through large windows. The antique furniture and thick rugs gave the room a serene atmosphere. Camille walked forward, her steps lightly echoing on the polished floor, but suddenly, she stopped dead in her tracks. What she saw shocked her deeply. Sitting calmly on a velvet sofa, with a big smile on her face, was the old woman from the bus, the one who had given her the address without a word. Marguerite. She looked more alert, more alive than ever, as if the darkness of the night and the fatigue she had felt on the bus had been nothing but an illusion. Her bright gaze immediately met Camille's, and she burst into a gentle, warm laugh. "I was waiting for you, Camille," she said in a calm but powerful voice. "I knew you'd come." Camille's heart was racing. How was this possible? So, Marguerite had been waiting for her, here, in this grand estate? Her mind began to spin, searching for explanations. She felt as if she were trapped in a strange dream. The woman who had let her in quietly withdrew, leaving Camille alone with Marguerite. Camille searched for words, but her throat was dry. Finally, she managed to speak. Why did you give me this address? Why me? Marguerite leaned slightly forward, her wrinkled hands resting on her knees. Because you have questions you've never dared ask, and answers you've been searching for a long time. You feel lost, don't you? Camille nodded, despite herself. It was true. For months, maybe even years, she had been drifting through her life without a clear purpose, as if something essential was slipping through her fingers. But how could Marguerite know this? There are things you can only understand by living them, Marguerite continued. That's why I guided you here. I knew you were ready to discover what awaits you. A heavy silence filled the room, laden with mysteries. Camille, still in shock, felt unable to tear her gaze away from Marguerite. There was something enchanting about her eyes, a wisdom that went beyond appearances. Camille realized that she hadn't been mistaken. This elderly woman was no ordinary person. What should I do? Camille asked, almost in a whisper, as if she feared hearing the answer. Marguerite slowly stood up, approaching Camille with an unexpected grace for her age. She gently took Camille's hands in hers and murmured, "You must be ready to lose everything to discover who you really are." Camille felt a shiver run through her body. The weight of those words hit her deep inside. It was frightening, but also strangely liberating. "Come with me," said Marguerite, inviting Camille to follow. "It's time for you to see what I wanted to show you." Still shaken, Camille followed Marguerite wordlessly through the long hallways of the house. They exited through a door that led to a vast garden hidden behind the estate. The trees were old and imposing, seemingly guarding this secret place. In the center of the garden stood a small stone fountain, surrounded by vibrant flowers that formed a perfect circle. Marguerite walked toward the fountain, Camille by her side, the silence of the garden amplifying every step. She paused for a moment, gazing at the tranquility of the place before turning toward Camille, a kind smile on her lips. "Camille," Marguerite began in a soft voice, "I see something rare in you. A light, a strength you don't even suspect. That's why I brought you here. I want you to stay with me." Camille, still reeling from everything she had just experienced, widened her eyes. "Stay with you," she repeated, unsure of what Marguerite was exactly offering. Marguerite nodded. "Yes, I need someone like you. Someone sincere, with a pure heart and a willingness to fight for what is right. I'm offering you a position here, at this estate. A position where you will not only work but also thrive." Marguerite's words resonated in Camille, like an unexpected melody. She had never imagined that this strange encounter on the bus could change her life in such a way. "A job?" she asked, trying to clarify the situation. "Yes, a job with a salary that will allow you to never worry about your material needs again," Marguerite replied with a smile. "5 times what you're earning now. You will live here in this estate, and you will be part of my family. Think of it as a dream come true." Camille struggled to contain her emotion. Such a salary, such an opportunity. It was more than she had ever dared to hope for. She thought of her small, modest apartment, her long, exhausting workdays. This offer seemed too good to be true. "Why me?" Camille asked, still incredulous. "There must be hundreds of people more qualified, more experienced." Marguerite gently took her hand, her gaze filled with compassion. "It's not about qualifications, my dear. It's about destiny. I feel you have something special. A kindness, an integrity that few people possess. I'm convinced you're the one I've been looking for." Camille fell silent for a moment, trying to process everything that was happening. This unexpected meeting, this unlikely offer. She felt torn between excitement and uncertainty. "I would like to accept," she murmured, "but I have some things to sort out first. I need some time to organize my current life." Marguerite nodded with understanding. "Of course, I understand. Take all the time you need. I'm not in a hurry, and I will be here when you're ready. You need time to set everything in order, and I respect that." Camille suddenly felt relieved. She wouldn't be rushed into this decision. Maybe a day or two, just to wrap up my commitments and take care of the last details. Take all the time you need, Marguerite replied with a kind smile. When you come back, everything will be ready for you. Finally, Camille stood up, ready to leave, but her heart was still racing with excitement and gratitude. She looked at Marguerite, this woman who seemed both mysterious and full of wisdom, and thought that perhaps this encounter would change her life in ways she never could have imagined. As she made her way toward the door, Marguerite called out a final sentence. Remember, Camille, true opportunities only knock once. When you return, your new life will begin. Camille smiled shyly in response, aware that her future had just taken an unexpected turn. The next day, Camille returned to the restaurant where she had worked for years. She held her resignation letter tightly, her heart pounding. Her boss, a man who was always tense and authoritative, was shocked when she announced her departure. Camille, do you really want to leave? He asked in an unusually soft voice, far removed from the condescending tone she was used to. Camille nodded, determined. Yes, I've made my decision. Her boss furrowed his brow. Listen, I know I've been hard on you sometimes, but you're one of the best employees I've ever had. I'm willing to double your salary if you stay. Camille blinked, surprised. After all these years of being belittled, she had never imagined her boss would value her so much. But she quickly realized that his offer was motivated only by his own interest. He knew she was indispensable, that her devotion and hard work were difficult to replace. For a long time, he had exploited her need for this job, taking advantage of her situation. It's a generous offer, but I must decline, she replied calmly. I have found an opportunity that better aligns with my aspirations. Her boss looked at her, stunned by her decision. However, Camille felt a deep sense of relief as she handed over her resignation letter. For the first time in a long while, she felt free. 2 days later, Camille started working at Marguerite's. Upon her arrival, she was warmly welcomed, with respect, so different from the cold and hostile atmosphere of the restaurant. Her work was not demanding, but rather enriching. She was responsible for organizing the daily affairs of the estate, managing the staff, and ensuring the guests were well taken care of. Marguerite gave her a great deal of autonomy, treating her as a true ally rather than just an employee. Each day, Camille discovered more about Marguerite's generosity and kindness. She took special care of the estate's employees, always mindful of their well-being. Life at the manor was peaceful, far from the stressful hustle and bustle Camille had grown accustomed to. One day, while they were having tea together in the garden, Marguerite confided in her. I've always told you that you were destined for something greater, Camille. I wasn't wrong. Camille, moved by Marguerite's words, began to wonder if she had found more than just a job here. Perhaps she had finally found a place where she could truly flourish and discover who she really was. This story reminds us that sometimes, the most meaningful opportunities come in unexpected forms. It also teaches us the importance of following our intuition and taking risks to achieve our dreams. Camille dared to make the leap, and in return, she found a new sense of purpose in her life and a genuine chance to realize herself. We hope Camille's story has inspired you and reminded you that true wealth often lies in self-discovery and the courageous choices we make.